Hi, I'm Antonia Crane. I'm the founder of Strippers United. I'm an author. I'm a PhD candidate at USC, and I advocate and champion the rights of strippers and sex workers everywhere.
I went to your thing. You did a panel in November after the NLRB vote
Right.
count for NoHo stripper strike. You were there with a bunch of former Lusties. I got such good tape from that panel. I was like, I got to have Antonia back to fill in the gaps. So I want to get your story. I read about it in Spent, but just start at the beginning. You're in SF. How many clubs had you worked at prior to the Lusty? I want to talk about your time there and then how you guys eventually unionized.
Great. So to begin, I was hoovering methamphetamine by the mountain in like 92 and attending Mills College for Black feminist thought, post-structural feminist theory, women's studies. We called it women's studies then. We called it ethnic studies then. We called it
Mhm.
performance art studies at Mills College. And that's in Oakland. And I couldn't make my rent and I was struggling. And I was also slinging coffee. I would have to get up at 5 a.m. So, of course, I would just stay up all night and then go like open this cafe at 5 a.m. It was called Jumpin' Java. It was in DeBose Triangle. And I was slinging coffee and I was just like, God, I fucking hate this. And I would go home. And I was also working on the hate at Wasteland. And I would go basically dumpster diving for clothes. And we would go to put out night, which isn't what it sounds like. Put out night was when everybody put their furniture on the sidewalk and we would borrow somebody's car and literally drive around and pick up suitcases full of clothes and pick up desks and bookshelves and go home and like we'd have spray painting parties and just spray paint furniture, and that's like how I lived, right? And so then I was working at Wasteland, which is a used clothing store, and it was before it was like McWasteland. It used to be actually very cool and goth and interesting with tons of like really cool 40s suits and just like all kinds of quirky used vintage clothing.
But it's
And
still retail and you're not getting paid a ton, right?
it was like, God, what was minimum wage? I want to say it was like 4.75 or like
Oh my God.
5.50. I just remember it being so like, was it 7.25? I don't know. It was just like, we'll have to look it up, like what was minimum wage in 1992. That's what I was
Yes.
making. So I would sell my clothes and I would just wash the clothes and like sew buttons on them. And then I would go like on my lunch break at Wasteland, sell my clothing. And I was just like, God, I owed everyone $300. I was that bitch that would write letters to the landlord and like go find where his office was and like give it to the front desk person and be like, and it was just a letter from me begging my landlord for like 10 more days. Like that's what happened. And I was stripping at the Century. It is on Larkin Street. It's in the loin, in the Tenderloin. It's across the street from Mitchell Brothers, where a lot of like queer women were doing live sex shows, but they wouldn't hire anybody who was like a little bit rougher or tattooed. And I had a septum piercing, a tongue piercing, super short, spiky hair. I have pictures I can show you. I was actually bald. It was like the Sinead O'Connor kind of like I was bald and wore Pulp Fiction, like the wigs.
Uh-huh.
I would just borrow clothes from my friends to go audition and like I just was that person. I was like, can I just borrow that dress and like that this clingy weird t-shirt dress? And I would just wear my Doc Martens and I worked at the Century. I was on meth still. We're talking 1992, 1993. So I was like shaking. Everybody else was on heroin and I was on meth. So it was like I
Oh,
was in a
you were
different
ahead of your
life.
time.
Yeah, okay. So I was ahead of my time. Everybody was just like on China White. Like I remember them saying that word and I was just like, what are you doing? What is that? But they were all on heroin. I was on meth. They were always saying like, slow down on stage. You're too fast. Because of course I was just like freaking out, just like vibrating on fucking speed and like tearing off some weird dress. And like I remember I danced to Stretch, like an extended remix version of Sinead O'Connor's Stretched on Your Grave. I had on a veil and I was just like, it's performance art. Like it
Was
is.
it always performance art for you?
Back then it was. Stripping was really cool. Like all of the lesbians were doing it. Like all of the like weird, like dirtbag queers, we were all stripping. It just made sense. Like it just made sense. So like yeah, they were like doing like I remember there were these like identical twins and they would just like have these boas, so like these showgirl routines. And there was this woman who was quite curvy, quite more curvy than you would imagine being like a stripper. I really, your mind is blown about like, wow, what's really allowed? What is beautiful?
Uh-huh.
I feel like things got more oppressive later, but like back then, like this very curvy blonde woman, this very Anna Nicole Smith body positive woman who was just gorgeous, had literally her own room in the club, like a storage room where customers would fill it with like television sets, stereos, speakers, candelabras. I just remember being shown like her room where customers would just like she had literally a storage unit inside the bowels of a strip club.
That's insane. So when you're okay, so you're versus making $7 an hour or
Yeah.
6.25 or whatever the
Or
fuck you
yeah,
were
whatever it
making.
was.
But whatever you're making stripping
Mhm.
was like hundreds of dollars a night, right? Like way more night and day.
Well, you know, I was on speed, so I was bad at it
Oh.
at first, right? So I had to learn from these junkies, and they always told me just like, you know, just like ask them like, do you want to play with the kitty? And like they were just all so gacked. It was so fun. They were beautiful. They were like 20, you know, like everyone just asked them if you want to play with the kitty. Yeah, so I was kind of bad at it.
I
On
can't imagine you being bad though. Like knowing you now,
I
and
was
so I'm curious, like, were you born this way, or is this is this
right.
decades of learned?
I learned. I just watched and listened and learned. I learned how to pole dance from the black strippers at Market Street Cinema. They taught me how to hustle as well. And we all really got along. Like, we really got along. I know it's weird, it's not really known. And you, if you watch any television show at all ever in the last 30 years, it seems like strippers are all extremely hostile toward each other. No.
Uh-huh.
So I worked at the Century initially, which is funny because I started at the Century and then I ended up back at the Century like 12 years later also. I just made a big circle around San Francisco. So I worked at the Century, but I also worked at the Crazy Horse when I was high. And Nina Hartley came to perform because back then they would pay for these performers, these porn performers, to come and perform on stage. And they were feature performers. And then those performers would like stand and with their posters, and people would get, you know, pictures with them and posters. I have posters somewhere. Anyway, Nina Hartley came to perform at Crazy Horse. She walks into the dressing room and she's like, "Who's going to have sex with me tonight on stage?" I'm like, "I am. Me." And like I literally got fucked by Nina Hartley on the stage at the Crazy Horse in, I guess it probably was like this, we're talking about 95 or 96.
Amazing. So are you at the Lusty at this point?
So I walked into, okay, so I have to get sober first. So I was a bad stripper because I was high and I was sort of like, I would just like, oh, cool, I have $80. I'm gonna leave. I can buy my drugs. What? Like, I can buy my drugs. I have like $100. That's fine. And so I was just like, wow, I made $80 like in 3 hours. This is amazing. And so I would just like go buy my drugs, or I would get, you know, get my speed, or I would like go get drunk, and I would like make $40, start playing pool, start winning at pool, and then like get drunk and then just like leave, like forget. Like it was just so I was a terrible hustler because I was just like high and I just didn't care and I didn't want to be touched. Like the thing about me and meth, which is different from the boys I was running with who were making speed and cooking speed, the gay men, which I was sort of like a member of this group for some reason. They all wanted to fuck all the time on meth, and I was just like, gross, do not touch me. And so I'm like a stripper who doesn't want to be touched. How the fuck was I gonna make money? I lose my shit as one does on meth for years.
Hmm.
Hallucinations, hearing voices. I'm 106 pounds. My teeth are see-through. I didn't
Hmm.
lose my teeth miraculously. I just looked like I looked awful and I thought I looked really hot. And like I was homeless. I didn't realize that at the time. And now looking back, clearly I was. Like I did not have a home. I couch surfed. That's called homeless. I was that. Like it's like it really took me years to like really see what
Hmm.
happened and see how I lost my shit and like really lost my grip, and became like a drug addict. Like my friends were telling me, you are a speed freak, you need to get help. So anyway, I end up in a psych ward on a 72-hour hold at Davies Medical Center. I've sliced my wrist open. You can't see it. I'm tattooed. And I had no intention of staying sober. I just wanted to sort of like get my act together and sleep it off. And I ended up staying sober and getting sober and meeting a woman who had like a year and a half and was working in the lap dancing clubs, stone cold sober, was drove a 1974 orange Honda motorcycle. She had like thick hair down to her ass and a mermaid tattoo. And I was just like, you. And so she became my sponsor, and I have been sober ever since.
That's amazing.
April 3rd, 1995 was when I walked
Almost
out of
30
that.
years.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Good
So
for you.
I became
So
an excellent stripper.
at the and this is where when you go to the Lusty.
Yeah, so through my work with, I will call her Josie, that was her stripper name. Through my AA recovery work with Josie, I kept my other jobs, but we decided that I was going to take a break from the hustle of the lap dancing clubs because I was like getting my drugs there. The drugs were like on the tables in the dressing rooms, like everyone was really fucked up. It was just very hard for me to be around. And it wasn't like, oh, it's bad or it's dangerous. It was just like, I think I need a break from kind of just having it just literally 3 inches away from me at all times
Yeah.
while I'm getting sober. So I did that for like, I think I had maybe a solid year under my belt, because I walked back into the Lusty in 96 and I got sober in 95. So that checks. So I was like, I think I can do this behind glass deal. She was like, listen, you owe everyone money. You're behind on your rent. You can't couch surf forever.
Hmm.
A wonderful friend of mine, her name is Sarah Sophie Flicker. She was in the back of the ambulance when I was on the psych ward, and I slept on her couch for a year, my first year. She was very kind to me. We went to Mills together. Anyway, my sponsor was like, you got to be self-supporting. You got to like figure this out. You got to like get an apartment. You got to pay people back. And I'm like, but I can't. Like, look at what I'm making. And she's like, well, you got to start dancing again. We kind of talked it through. We talked it through and decided the Lusty would be a good option because it's the type of unusual strip club that has the audacity to wait a week for a paycheck. Like you're not walking with your money and buying drugs. You actually have to wait for that paycheck. It's a paycheck strip club. It's crazy. They have the audacity to like put you on you're on a schedule. I have actual schedules from the Lusty and pay stubs.
You were like for sure employees.
No doubt about it. Okay, so I had never like been a real employee in this regard where you like here's the time. Do you know what a time clock looks like where you actually punch
Yeah.
it? So I did that like a factory. Like you go, and if you were 1 minute late, you didn't get your $1 raise. And they gave us like raises every so often. It wasn't horribly terrible, but it was like you couldn't be 1 minute late to your shift, or you wouldn't get the raise. You'd have to wait the next week to have a perfect time sheet. So like we literally punched in, and top wage was 21 an hour. And to get to that, you started at like 17 or something, or 16, which was very good hourly.
Hmm.
The shifts were like, let's see, what's 9 to 2, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 5 hour shifts.
Hmm.
And so I started there. It was behind glass. There's this aspect of sex work that few people talk about, but Julia Query talks about it in her film Live Nude Girls Unite, which is a very good film still today. She talks about the boredom of it.
Mm.
And there really is something that is very boring on a baseline of certain kinds of sex work. I mean, I find catering to men's needs terrifically boring in general. So, but like being around, being with my workers and with the lusty ladies, the lusties, I'll just say, so we don't have to run into gender problems today, but like the lusties is what we called each other. So the lusties, that there was like this camaraderie, you know, and like just being very close to them. Your arms are around them, you're doing pull tricks, you're laughing together. It's worker solidarity in like a fishbowl environment. And so you really are talking to each other about what's going on at work. Like you just are, because you're right next to each other, you're naked. You can tell when things are not going well or something terrible is happening or someone is scared or someone's tired or someone's injured. Like there's no way that that's not going to be a topic of conversation. And my friend Star, Jessica Dezette, who was from ACT UP, Portland, Maine, along with Chuck, who was support staff, Portland, Maine, ACT UP. These are activists. We're talking San Francisco, early 90s. We're AIDS activists. I was ACT UP San Francisco. Jessica Dezette was like, you're being filmed, like your butthole is being filmed. Like you can see the little Jawa light. She lost her temper and she was just like, move over here. And so I moved. She's like, I'm going to change things around here. She stormed off stage. Of course, management told her, you can go work somewhere else if you don't like it here. That's what they will always tell you. And for me, that's what I remember. I think that if you ask any other lusty, they probably have a similar or same story, something similar to that, of like someone was being filmed, we noticed, someone walked out, someone got fired, we all walked out.
It was the beginning. I mean, you're in that time frame where like that kind of thing was just starting to happen, right? Like people just had camcorders or
Right.
whatever they were using at that time.
Yeah. And we offered, just like the Star Garden dancers, like we offered, there were lesbians who were a couple who were activists on stage with us, and they were artists and they made posters, which I have in my refrigerator. And they made a sign that was like no cameras. So we were like, hey, we'll make the signs, just no cameras allowed. Like, we'll help, we'll make the signs. Can we just do this? And management would rip down our signs. Like, that doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost you anything. But there is an irrational fear, or perhaps a rational fear, of workers who are commiserating about their conditions, wanting safer protocols at work, wanting less discriminatory practices at work, wanting fair wages at work. That just, terrifies them. And so, yeah, so that was the beginning. Star walked off. There, I'm sure were moles. There are theories of who those people were. They called these, intimidating meetings where we had to sit on the floor. I have notes like written on schedules from those meetings. June, who I think her name was June, she was a show director. And she was an ex-dancer, and she would cry and just be like, how can you do this to me after everything I do for you? It's very typical stuff. Very, very
Because she's
typical.
like, I work here and you're threatening my employment too, or something.
They're just, yeah, it's just, there's an irrational fear of feeling personally attacked when workers are taking a stand. And they love to work that emotional anger, and they underestimate the solidarity of strippers. They really do.
So tell me about, you on that panel, you guys were talking about organizing then versus now, and you've had
Mhm.
a taste in both worlds. So what was it like when you guys got started? You walked out, and then how are you making it happen?
Okay, so what was fun? What's fun to talk about? I forget how old you are. You're probably maybe one day older than
I'm
her.
39.
Oh, fuck you. You are not 39. You're like 30. You're like maybe 30.
Thank you.
So we used to meet at the Chinese restaurant next door. There was a time of answering machines. So you lived in an apartment with six other people. There was one answering machine and post-its all over the wall. And so you would just like be taking down messages and like putting them on post-its on the wall. And like we would figure out where we were going to meet and what we were going to do. Right. And so we would generally meet. What was it called? Was it the Onion or something? There was some club across the street from the Lusty that was where live bands played and stuff, a bar, and we would sometimes meet there. We would often meet right next door at the Chinese restaurant. So we would meet in person, no cell phones, and have our strategy meetings.
Are you picketing like the Star Garden girls
We
or
did pick
people?
it. Yeah, we did pick it. We got a lot of support. We got a lot of signatures. I was kind of amazed at the support, actually. What I remember laughing about was that men would honk at us in support at our picket. They would drive by and honk at us for support, but if they were with their girlfriends or wives, they wouldn't.
You
So we used to
dogs.
laugh about that. So that was similar, just like we'd wear wigs and outfits, and we had a lot of support. People have been waiting for a very long time for strippers to unionize.
So what did it look like when you finally got what you wanted? I mean, so the Star Garden case, that's like 15 months. Did it take you guys that long?
It took us 2 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, this is fast. Mhm.
Wow.
This is fast. And I think that I mean I don't really have any theories about it. It feels like it's not fast, probably for them. They picketed. I mean, they worked way harder on their campaign. There's a lot of social media stuff. They have a lot of fundraisers. I don't remember if we did have fundraisers. I don't think we did. We would do things like, I forget if it's in my book, but is Mudman in my book? This customer that drove us out in the middle of a mud area in San Rafael.
I think so. You had clever names for a lot of people though, so
So these customer regular clients of some of the dancers would like support us by being like, okay, like bring 6 of your friends. I'll meet you. We'll drive this Jeep out to this construction site. You'll pose with me. We'll get all muddy. It'll be sexy. And we'll pay you. Everybody got paid like at least $300. Like we would just do these weird jobs with each other's clients.
oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, kind of fucking dangerous if you think about it, but it's just these were regular clients, so like they had been, pre-screened. But yeah, so those are the fundraisers that we did. The Star Garden strippers are crushing it. Their picket has been like a celebratory, clever thing that reminds me of ACT UP in its cleverness and flamboyance, in its tongue-in-cheekness, in its community spirit.
Well, it proves
Um,
they know how to put on a fucking show is the
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
But they had you guys to be inspired by and to look at and have as a blueprint. Did you have anything like that as a blueprint?
We had ACT UP, we had Food Not Bombs, we had Queer Nation,
So it
we
was like
had,
other groups at the time that were doing similar things in other spaces. That's who inspired you.
I think that was our guiding light, was the work being done by the lesbian Avengers, the performance artists, feminism in general, Food Not Bombs, Needle Exchange, ACT UP mainly, because they were so clever and so just refusing to be shunned by the powers that be. So I think that was our guiding light. And I just interviewed Velveeta just briefly to get a quote for an article that I'm writing. And unfortunately, I don't think this quote is in there, but she did say like the Lusty Ladies were our guiding light, which is so sweet and
Hmm.
amazing. Ours was a 2 year endeavor. During that time, the thing that's really special about San Francisco that's unlike here, but I can compare what the Star Garden dancers did in equivalency, I guess, is what we'll say. Okay, San Francisco is really special because it's small and you can like walk to another club. Like,
Hmm.
hey, let's go to Market Street. And like 3 or 4 of us would just be like, well, we're going to go work at Market Street Cinema. Great, sleaziest club in San Francisco. I made so much money at that fucking club. That's really where I learned to hustle. So we would go work at Market Street and Chez Paris and Centerfolds, and we would just go to other clubs. And that's how we survived. I remember for myself because like we were locked out, and then well, I'm gonna have to go work at this other club tonight. Like that's just how it was. Like just go work at the other club. And that is really different than LA. LA is very sprawled out, but the what
Hmm.
the Star Garden dancers did is a lot of hybrid online shows. So
Yeah.
they just kept the ball in the air and they just like kept doing these fundraisers that were online and had these like really cool Zoom components. And that's the same as like walking across the street and going to this other club for the night. seeking refuge and finding these other channels, these other avenues of opportunity. So I feel like that was the point of affinity that I was trying to like say, is that we were able to, I know for myself, because I was so poor, I had to go like find another club to work at immediately, like that night when we were locked out, which was fine and invigorating because that we were, I never doubted we were doing the right thing, but it was challenging, you know, to survive. And the Star Garden dancers like held fundraisers. They followed our Soldiers of Pole Federal Bar Raising Hell model
Model.
and did that and like made a ton of money, sold it out every time. They just crushed it. And then just doing these online components. So it's just innovation, you know, it's just innovation.
So you guys were precedent setting for the unionization and then for the co-op that came after. Were you there for that part of it?
I was not there for that part of it. I wasn't really active. I might have been on this schedule. I think I took a leave. I don't remember that part of it. That was after my time. So I left around 98, 99.
Mhm.
I kind of like, I arrived, I worked, we unionized, and I like stayed for that. And then I was making a lot of money in the lap dancing clubs,
Mhm.
but I stayed on the like, I, you know, of course, voted and celebrated and stayed. And then I think I just moved on to the lap dancing clubs because I was making a lot more money. I have a friend, Pandora, who was a union shop steward. She's on the paperwork, like she was the name on the paperwork for the co-op, and she can, we talk all the time, and I can connect you if you want to talk more about that.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Mhm.
I wanna chat with you about starting Soldiers of Pole, now Strippers United, but, like, I feel like you set this whole thing in motion by giving this, like, container to it in LA, being like, "This is ladies, this is" or I don't wanna gender it, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of ladies involved people,
strippers.
uh,
Yeah,
dancers.
sex
This is
workers.
how
Yeah.
you can do it, and it kinda started with the AB5 stuff,
Mhm.
but what year and tell me about the beginning of that.
I want to say 2018 is when AB5 came down the pipeline, and I remember talking with, you know, I come from a law family, and so I remember talking to my dad about it and various other people about it, and realizing that it meant that we could unionize. Now, you know, it's a controversial topic among dancers because of how it has been played out and
Mm,
how the club owners have really put their spin on that and used it to divide dancers and to divide workers, which I think from if you look at it from a helicopter view, you can really see that. But there's a lot of anger and rage about like the fact that BIPOC dancers were fired first
mhm,
and veteran strippers were let go second. And
mhm,
there's a lot of anger and rage regarding AB5, but I think it's misdirected because we never actually needed AB5. We've always been employees. And you can see that in multiple lawsuits in other states as well, not just California, but in these class action lawsuits and arbitration, which are public, you can look them up and see how people have ruled, like in New Orleans, you can see how it has ruled in dancers' favor like 99.9% of the time that dancers are owed back wages because they've always been employees. So technically, now we really didn't need it. But I think that what it did is it awakened something, and it was meant for drivers, by the way. It was meant for truckers, Teamsters.
oh, long haul
Yeah,
truckers, yeah.
it was written with them in mind, but it affected all of these other groups of workers. And I would say that it affected dancers very negatively. Like, I'm not upset that they have interpreted it in a negative way. I still think that it made kind of the argument of whether we're employees or not more clear. And I think it made the path clearer and it lit our path more brightly to be like, okay, yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court of California says we are employees, therefore, employees can unionize. Now, we should be awarded other things as well, but we're going to have to fight for that. And I think that I thought that it would be kind of easier to kind of convince people, like, hey, this means this. And you, like, every employee in California since 2014 has paid sick leave. No
Mhm,
employer will ever tell you that. You also have sick leave, like, let's say your husband or your partner has to get an operation, you can get a paid day off for that if you live in California. And this is true. Like there's just a lot of things that are true, but like it's true in theory, right?
Hmm.
In life, in the clubs, these are criminal enterprises that they are used to not only not acknowledging that strippers are human and workers, and that they have normalized ripping us off, tip stealing, committing wage theft, and making us pay our own wages and worse, and all of the discrimination also. But they've just become accustomed to not getting busted, and they have become accustomed to that being normalized by the dancers. So the dancers, we have also internalized and normalized this behavior, and I think that that is a lot of internal work that has been going on for the last couple of years, really untangling who told us that that's normal, like that we should pay our own wages, that we should pay to work, that we have these arbitrary fees and fines. That is when you tell any worker, any other field, any other, I mean, even car washers have unionized. You tell a room full of workers, their jaws dropped on the floor. So since 2018, we started having Know Your Rights meetings. A.M. Davies, myself, Jordan Palmer, and the two previous founders who, for their own reasons, decided to like leave and move on to other things, which everyone gets to do. Activism sucks. Organizing sucks. It's really hard. It's really scary. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of faith. Sorry, it does. Organizing sucks. It's very hard.
But you saw this. I mean, I know it probably you're in it, so it like seems longer, but just like how you said, it was fast, really, and how
It was
these
fast. Yeah.
movements can kind of go. I mean,
Mhm.
that's only been 5 years, and there's
Yeah.
now a successful union club in LA.
And they want to be a co-op.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fucking amazing. And I have a really good relationship with that group. I'm really, really close with them. I'm really excited for them. They are bringing the really specific language and the post-COVID safety protocols to the table. They're bringing really important disability language to the table. They're bringing really exciting gender language to the table. They are really determined to push anti-discrimination language in the contract and force the club to hire a more vibrant and diverse roster of dancers. They're really committed to that. And I feel other strippers looking and waiting to see, because trust is really hard to build with sex workers, as you know, even though I've trusted you from like day one. It's very hard to
Yeah.
build trust with
But
strippers.
I mean, it looks like such a close-knit, tight-knit community, and I mean, you see them waiting. Do you think there's gonna be more?
Yes, I hope and dream that there will be more. I think it can look a lot of different ways. I think pushing against the systems of oppression can look a lot of different ways. And the reason why I'm saying that carefully is because there are also some strippers pushing back, and they are working within independent contractor language, and they are
Mm,
still pushing for change. I think it can look in a lot of different ways. And I do think that other strip clubs are going to unionize. I do think that there's a certain club, I don't want to like
mhm,
blow kind of strategy stuff, but as much as I would love to see, you know, the larger corporate clubs really be taken down and changed in a big way because they are the worst offenders, I think we might have to start small
mhm.
and go to the smaller clubs and really just taking care of strippers and building stripper solidarity and organizing, even though like literally strippers and almost and lots of people would rather do anything else but organize. It's scary. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of looking into the future. You have to be willing to risk things, and not everybody is willing to do that, and that's totally fair and that's legit. But I think that like I think that strippers are waiting to see the contract. And I know the Star Garden's intentions. And I think it's going to be really beautiful and exciting to see what happens.
Yay.
Do you think it's going to happen more?
Stay tuned. Well, I think we're at an interesting point for labor in a lot of different industries right now. And I think technology is kind of forcing that in some ways, with the writers. And
Yeah.
so it's like labor is having a moment. And I don't know. I think we might. There's inspiration that's proves it can happen. So before we go, tell us about your directorial debut.
Oh, yeah. I am really excited. I had a first directing experience for a short film. It's called Lady Los Angeles. And the reason I did it, the reason I wrote several shorts with the thought of wouldn't it be cool to have like Black Mirror, but sex work, like a sex work version of Black Mirror.
Ooh.
And so I have several shorts, and this one is the one I decided to make. I felt really urgently about it because I've never seen a story that takes place post Sesta Fafsa in a world where your life online is taken down and one has to survive. And I've wanted that. It's about a Latinx trans femme person who's a skateboarder, and she has community, and she's just going through her day, and she gets kicked off the internet and has to figure out how to make her day. And I don't want to give anything away, but it's not easy for her. But also I also thought about the demographic of Los Angeles being Latinx and how important that is, to have that person be at the center, and to also have that person like have a complicated life with a lot of friends and support, and what that looks like, and also what it looks like to live in a aggressively gentrified neighborhood
Mm.
and looking for work, and how that feels to not be cool enough or not be this enough or that enough, and to be a sex worker during that specific time when your livelihood is illegal. So that's the thought behind it.
Is it in a festival? Are people going to be able to access it soon?
I sent it to you, but yes, people can access it soon. I think I'm waiting on some festivals. I did get into a festival called Translations.
Oh, nice.
And so we did have a premiere, a world premiere in Seattle, and it was really, really sweet, and it was really fun. And I got to see people that I've known for a really long time. It was beautiful to see it on a big screen. It was very overwhelming, actually, to see it on a big screen. It's like very overwhelming. It's really hard to describe the sensation of actors saying the lines that I've written.
Yeah.
It's like you can feel it on your skin. My skin just prickles when that happens. Like I cried the first time it happened.
Oh.
Just like, I can't believe this. And I worked with the actor, a trans femme, beautiful person who, because it got shut down during the pandemic. So we waited like a year and a half. So I was on Zoom with her, and she contributed to the dialogue, which was really
Amazing.
fun. Yeah, it was really cool. And our entire set was, trans led and BIPOC led, and that is challenging. Collaborating is really challenging in general, as I'm sure
Amen.
you know.
Yeah. I know this.
Yeah, it's deeply, deeply collaborative making a film,
Yeah.
and it's
I
expensive, and it's impossible.
You're so right. I was just like, I mean, this is a plug for your book, Spent, but I was just talking to my boyfriend about this. I was like, writing books, it's a solo act, baby. And if you're making movies, or TV, whatever, you're in a band. You're in a big
Totally,
fucking band. You're in an orchestra.
totally. Yeah, yeah, and that was
So,
really, really. It's a really challenging experience, but it's a really. I would say I grew more from that experience in ways that were like very difficult. And yeah, I definitely am not in a hurry to be on set again.
well, I love the sound of sex work Black Mirror, so I hope it happens, but you know, maybe the next collaboration is going to be
Different.
different.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the first time, anybody I talk to who's made their first movie, like it almost killed them.
Oh
You
yeah.
every single person I've ever spoken to is like, oh my God, everything went wrong, everything. Like it's just that's the learning thing about the impossibility of making stuff
Hmm.
and making it on a shoestring, especially, without like that big money
Yeah.
or support, really. You're just like you're really just trying your best and it's very hard. Do you direct films or are you mostly an actor? And I know you're a writer, but do you?
No, but I'm hoping to. I was talking about it in the context of like trying to write TV. It's like, let me just try to write a book first and by myself.
Yeah, and
Where I
then
don't need a million people.
yeah, and then you
So,
can write the pilot.
yeah, yeah.